You were supposed to say amen to that. I'm indeed grateful to be with you this morning, and I pray that my time here will be beneficial to all of you. Isaac Watts in the 17th century wrote, "O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Under the shadow of thy throne, still may we dwell secure, sufficient to thine arm above, and our defense is sure." David says in Psalm 90, verse 2, "Before the mountains were brought forth, or even you had formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God." As this coronavirus spreads, we all are anxious and concerned about the future, and rightly so, because we really know very little about it. But I also believe that all of us are believers, and that our hope and trust is in Jesus, and we are trusting and believing him to deliver us from this pandemic. It appears that we are on our way, and everybody said amen. I am not about doom and gloom, because as the songwriter puts it, he was our help in the past, and he will deliver us from this pandemic. God is our source. He is our strength. He is our deliverer, and he will see us through this pandemic. Shall we pray? Our Father and our God, we come before you this morning with thanksgiving in our hearts. We thank you for this group of men and women whom you have selected to serve our country and your people at this particular time. God, you are sovereign, and you are aware of what will take place this morning. My Father, we ask that you set your approval on the business that will be transacted today. Help us to be mindful that it is for the benefit of our country and our people. Father, we pray for our president that you will direct her in all of her ways. My Father, at this particular time, I ask for your direction on all members that are here today. May they lean not unto their own understanding, but to be led by you. These things we ask in the name of our Lord Jesus, who taught us to say, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen." Good morning, and be blessed.
Good morning, all. Adoption of minutes.
Madam President, Madam Vice President, I beg leave to move for the adoption of the minutes of the last meeting of this Honorable Senate, which occurred yesterday, the 23rd day of June, 2020. If I may obtain a second.
It's been moved and seconded that the minutes of the 23rd of June be adopted. As many as are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes are adopted. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign, swearing in of new senators, communication by the President, messages from the Governor General, messages from the House of Assembly, laying of documents by ministers, communications by ministers, communications by senators, questions, answers to questions, presentation of petitions, appointment of select committees, reports of committees, first reading of bills, second reading of bills. The chair recognizes Senator Bethel.
Thank you so very much, Madam Vice President. Yes, sir. All right. You get the same time as the minister. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Just so that the public will be aware, we have accommodated the opposition in one small respect. They have a resolution seeking to express disapproval of the decision of the Central Bank of the Bahamas to get rid of the penny. So I have agreed that they can speak to this issue in the course of the budget debate, because every budget is about dollars and cents. SENSE and CENTS. So on that programming note, we were agreed? Thank you. At some point, there's no question of that. So what would happen is, once we have completed the budget bills, we will then entertain a vote on the resolution without a debate, although members opposite can, if they wish, speak to the essence of the resolution in their contributions. Madam President, I now beg leave to move for the second reading and committal of a bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account for the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2020 and ending 30th of June 2021. Madam Vice President, for the information of the general public, this is the bill that speaks to what the government hopes to spend with the proceeds of its revenue. And its revenue, of course, is based upon tax revenue, but also, particularly in the circumstances of this year, revenue from borrowings, as will be explained. The budget proposes significant public spending, greatly reduced, though, over traditional amounts. This year, it is anticipated that total public expenditure would be exclusive of statutory expenditure, which is like, the salary of the Governor General, etc., will be $2.173 billion, which is considerably lower than the historical trends, but reflects the disciplines that recent events have forced on the country. Madam President, the time is out of joint. This immortal metaphor of a nation crippled by unfortunate circumstances was uttered by Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, in Shakespeare's play of that name. Our nation, and indeed the whole world, is crippled and out of joint. The full quotation, duly amended to put the third person in place of the first person, is, I'll say how he said it first: the time is out of joint. O cursed spite that ever I was born to set it right. I say, in respect of each of us, the time is out of joint. O cursed spite that ever we were born to set it right. Out of joint? You don't know out of joint? When Jacob fought with the angel and held him until the morning light and said, "Bless me." The angel said, "Your name is now Israel." and tapped him in the hip bone. And he was a lame man ever since, because you don't wrestle with God to no effect. That is what it means to be out of joint. When your bones are not in the correct place and you are crippled, that is where the world is, that is where the Bahamas is. But in this sad time, when the COVID-19 epidemic has eviscerated, cut the guts out of both the Bahamian and the world economies, we do not have the luxury of Hamlet to bemoan our fate. Nor can we accept the advice of Job's wife that he must curse God and die. We must accept God's will and thank him that we were born in this time, that we were born for such a time as this. We must rise up and meet the challenge. We must do all that is necessary to save our nation and our people. We must do everything in our power to set it right. This focused and carefully calibrated budget is a bold effort by a loving and caring government to stem the damage, to save and create jobs, to restrain all but essential spending, to provide and preserve and enhance foreign exchange stability, to provide essential support and services throughout our archipelago, and to reduce poverty. This 2020-2021 budget debate takes place at a time in our nation's history when we have been the hardest hit in most recent memory, possibly suffering the most devastating blows in more than a century. Not since the Great Depression and the end of Prohibition has the Bahamian economy experienced such a profound shock as a result of the twin disasters of Hurricane Dorian, quickly followed by the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the Great Depression and the end of Prohibition pale in comparison to the challenges which now face the modern Bahamas as a result of these twin disasters, which have tested the resiliency of every Bahamian. But we have responded and risen to the occasion in both instances. We are responding and rising to the occasion every minute of every day which God sends. Needless to say, 2020 has been an unprecedented and exceptional year, which will long be recorded in the history books, not only of the Bahamas, but the entire world. For us, the two pillars of destruction, Dorian and COVID-19, have affected every facet of our economy and culture. It has affected the way we worship, how our students learn, how we provide medical care. We've seen the reduction of certain freedoms. You can't walk into a shop with your face bare anymore. You can't go on the beach until someone gives you permission. You can't party hardy in the disco right now. Some do in the some people were wondering why Parliament Square had so much engine grease a couple of weeks ago. A lot of cars come and park here in the night. I don't know where they go. No, a lot of cars, even during lockdown, were parking in Rawson Square. I know where they go. This is what I've been informed by those who are the watchmen, if you will, and understand how these things happen. Not me. I don't know anything about it because when it was locked down, I stayed home. Thank God. But it is against this background of restrictions, new disciplines, a new normal, changes in the most basic functions, such as how we go to church, how we worship, where we can worship, when we can worship, who we can worship with. And it's against this background now that we come here to debate a budget. Because life must go on. Even though the way in which we live our lives must change in order to not only live with an inescapable reality, but to survive its ravages. The Bahamas, not unlike most countries globally, will be seriously economically challenged in this coming year. However, I am confident that with the continual fiscal discipline that this government has been exercising ever since and from its inception in 2017, we will steer this economy back on track and we will recover. Even through the pandemic, which saw the unemployment levels double in a few short weeks, in days, this government ensured that the National Insurance Board was fully funded to bring relief to the poor and vulnerable, inclusive of categories of workers who were either self-employed or who, more importantly, were in the informal economy and who were not, therefore, all regular in terms of their national insurance payments. Notwithstanding that, this government spent millions to assist displaced workers, whether in the formal or the informal economy. And I'm sure every senator, and I'm sure that every Bahamian who thinks fairly every day should thank the most honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Hubert Alexander Minnis, for the strength, the vision, the foresight of his leadership, for him having the courage to take the difficult and bold decisions that were necessary to save this country from total catastrophe. Against initial winds of opposition, he nonetheless pressed towards the mark to do what was right to protect this country. I'd like to thank the Honorable, the Deputy Prime Minister, K. Peter Turnquest, for his stellar leadership and financial acumen in steering and managing an economy that in the space of 1 month became a disaster zone, but bringing focus, a vision, and a plan for national economic recovery and rehabilitation. Thank you to the Deputy Prime Minister. And I'd like to thank Dr. Dwayne Sands for his service as Minister of Health and for the stellar work that he did in helping to muster the forces, put in place the task force, the COVID-19 group, and to begin the process and setting up the foundation on which we stand in terms of healthcare in this country. I come now to speak up to the issue of opening of the economy. Madam President, it is clear that all nations, bar none, must now, as a matter of urgent economic necessity, reopen their economies. There is a global consensus that this is a critically important next step. The first several months of total lockdowns have, however, served most useful purposes. Certainly in the Bahamas and in most countries, but of course, as we see every day we watch TV now, not in every country. But in most countries, these lockdowns serve the purposes, one, of flattening the curve of infections so that the infection rate among the general population, instead of going like this, went like this and then flattened. And in the Bahamas, it is clear we are now several weeks into only 104, knock wood, God, please, let it go any higher. And the last case, the 104th, was a travel-related case, and we knew that when we reopened our borders and brought our exiles home to the motherland, our Bahamians who had been trapped, that there's a risk that someone or other could well, and so we saw that. But the fact is, God willing, but up to now, essentially, we are COVID-free. Yes, we have some left cases, but there have been no new infections for several weeks. Thanks to the efforts of the government and indicative of this issue of all governments realizing they had to flatten that curve, but not every government being prepared to make the sacrifice or sacrifice the freedom. And we see what is going on our TVs every day. And this has implications for this whole thing about opening the economy, about which I will speak. The second thing that it achieved, is that the lockdowns prevented the overwhelming of our healthcare system. Realize that there's only one hospitalized case, whereas we see in our nearest neighbor, South Florida, that their hospitals are now reaching the point of critical overload. And there's a great danger that they could end up where northern Italy was, where basically they had no room to accommodate people. And one of the reasons why their death rate went so high was they had to basically tell you, go sit on the lawn. There's nothing, we can't accommodate you. Go home. We can't accommodate you. That didn't happen in the Bahamas. The third important thing is that the lockdowns serve to inculcate to the general public the three pillars of self-protection. The wearing of masks whenever you are out and in public and interacting with others whose health status you don't know nothing about. The wearing of masks, the use of hand sanitizers, or preferably constant washing of your hands in soapy water for more than 20 seconds. More than 20 seconds, and getting in between, on the tip, getting under the nails, getting there, and always. These things should by now be second nature to all of us. And I walk around with this. I mean, I look paranoid, but, it's a big bottle. But I walk around with this just about every day, and I encourage others to do so. And the third thing that it did is taught us about social or physical distancing. The need to keep at least 6 feet or 2 meters, if you want to use metric, between you and anybody else wherever possible. Whether it's in church, whether it's in the grocery store, whether it's on the street, to always keep as much distance as you can while engaging, because you don't want to, just be pulling off from people. And human beings, we love to touch and feel. But you have to resist that and keep that 6 feet distance while trying to stay engaged with other persons whose health status you don't know. So these 3 goals were achieved. And Bahamians can take great pride over the fact. In fact, the Bahamas is often spoken of as really setting a standard as to how to go about this. And the rest of the Caribbean, but particularly the Bahamas, particularly us. We set standards. We saw what had to be done, and we did it. We didn't hesitate. So we Bahamians can take pride as to where we are. I want to thank all of the healthcare professionals. So I thanked the politician earlier, but he couldn't do it. We couldn't do it without those hundreds and scores of healthcare workers, nurses, attendants, auxiliary nurses, what is called candy stripers in the old days, and immigration, customs, defense, and police force officers who every day stand in the gap at our borders, on our streets, in our communities, stand in the gap to protect our Bahamas to the best of their abilities from this deadly contagion and from those who break the curfew and all of that sort of stuff. But, Madam President, the economic cost of these necessary steps has been astronomical. Hence, we have the need this year to borrow probably in the region of $1.3 billion in a single year. Hopefully, we won't have to go all that way. But we need to have the ability to do so if necessary. And we have to open the economy. As you all say, damn if you do and damn if you don't. But you'll be dead if you don't open your economy, because it's simply impossible to sustain life without economic activity. And you'll be dead if you don't protect yourself from COVID. Yeah, I know. Right? Something about Nelly. I don't know the rest. We ain't dead already. We're not dead already. We are vibrant. We are alive. We know what we have to do. We know how to do it. I just want to urge young Bahamians who think they're Superman and Superwoman, for the Lord's sake, watch what's happening. 60% of the new infections in our nearest neighbor, from coast to coast, are people under 30. Because young people think they're Superman and Superwoman. You're not Superman, and you're not Superwoman. You must, young persons, you must obey and protect yourselves. Wear your masks. Sanitize. I know you don't want to tell me nothing when I was 21, so I'm begging you. I am not, and I don't presume to give orders to young people, because young, wild, run free. I know what it is. I've been there. Everybody around here been there. Don't just look at us and say, look at this old bunch of old people talking stuff, old fools. We were there with you. We know how you feel. You one day will be here where we are. And you may have to do the same thing. To look into a camera or whatever the recording device would be in 20 years, because God knows. Life changes so fast these days. Technology changes so fast. You may have to look into that and try to speak to the hearts and minds of the youngs who come after you. Please, in your own self-interest, protect yourself. The virus don't respect age. It doesn't respect what you think about how strong and immune you are. 60%, 6 out of 10 of all new infections now are occurring in young persons under 30. So I can only say, do your best. Do your best. Protect yourself. Coming to the budget issues now. The government has mandated budget cuts for every ministry and department. Indeed, the budget of the Office of the Attorney General has been reduced by 20%. It feels like we lost 50%. I mean, there's just absolutely no freedom to spend on the traditional things. But nevertheless, the departments under our portfolio are all committed, even on reduced budgets, to improving their productivity through the use of technology and to moving steadily towards the goal of a paperless ministry, thus reducing thousands of dollars spent annually on paper, bundles like this, and printer's ink. Because, you know, the ink sometimes is the most expensive thing. We are demonstrating our resiliency by our eagerness and willingness to embrace the new normal with the increased use of technology. You know, it's amazing. You get, you know, to have a Zoom meeting is like second nature now. And it is almost as good as looking people around the table, at their faces around the table. But in fact, it's probably better. You know, because everybody is a little more relaxed and more easy of address than if they're sitting in a room with a minister, you know, and then, you know, you speak when you're spoken to and not at all. Whereas I say, listen, man, say what you have to say over Zoom, and people talk, people speak. So we have embraced it, and we will most certainly continue to use Zoom even after this pandemic is over, because it enables us to connect, for example, with our office in Freeport and have face-to-face discussions with them about the challenges that they face. The Office of the Attorney General now, speaking about this office, it is a peculiar office that stands at the very heart of government. We stand in the crossroads of everything that the government does in any respect. There's scarcely any activity which can lawfully be completed without the advice of the Office of the Attorney General. And when our advice is not requested through inadvertence or mistake, usually you end up with someone bringing a lawsuit against the government or against some investor acting purportedly in pursuance of an HOA, a head of agreement. And, you know, there's no guarantee that you win always in these matters. And having our advice, even when obtained, is no guarantee that the government won't be sued, but it is usually the best protection from a successful legal attack on the execution of government policy. So, I mean, we stand in the crossroads of the actions being implemented by the executive or with the authority of the executive. All proposed contracts by all government agencies with contractors, except for the most basic ones like school contracts and construction work, but any contract for services that involves complex terms are vetted by my office. All proposed appointments, etc., that somehow were tied to the Constitution are assisted by the advice from the Office of the Attorney General. Any dispute which affects the implementations of policy across the board and across the broad range of government ministries must be referred to the Attorney General's office, particularly if there are legal issues. My office also has direct responsibility for a number of vital issues. We receive all requests for assistance under the mutual legal assistance treaties from foreign countries. We receive letters of requests called letters rogatory, which are sent to the judiciary seeking judicial cooperation between court and court. So a court in one country will, at the request of a party to some kind of litigation, send a request to our Supreme Court for judicial assistance. And these are sent directly to the Office of the Attorney General so that we can do what's necessary to get court orders to obtain that assistance. We also have responsibility for international cooperation under the Criminal Justice International Cooperation Act. And additionally, we have carriage of all matters relating to the cooperation with international conventions signed by the Bahamas since attaining independence, with the technical assistance of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So for example, the Convention on the Rights of Women, the functional reporting and day-to-day oversight would be of these things, while assigned to the appropriate ministries like the Bureau of Women's Affairs and all that sort of stuff. But in terms of reporting back to international agencies, because they always want annual reports, updates, etc., these are all processed through my office by a dedicated team led by Jewel Major, Chief Counsel Jewel Major. Significantly, we also have the carriage of relations with the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force and the Financial Action Task Force. As we would all know, the Bahamas was put into the FATF grey list countries with strategic deficiencies in their anti-money laundering, counter-financing of terrorism framework in June of 2017. Scarcely 2 weeks after we came to office, we were informed that we were going to be, and that was confirmed the next month in June, due to an adverse mutual evaluation by the CFATF, which was completed in 2015. 2015, we knew what the problems were, but the government was rather distracted by a whole lot of other things, I think, and so not as much was done as needed to be done. So it fell on the FNM to shoulder the burden of 2 years of deficient responses. We did so, and thanks to the efforts of this government, with the able assistance of all regulatory agencies, and with the full support of the private sector, and I must say here with the opposition support as well. So I would like to thank the leader opposite for the fact that at critical moments when we knew that we had to basically commandeer the agenda of the House of Assembly to pass a host of bills, I requested to meet with the leadership of the opposition. They came, I explained the situation, I explained what was needed, and they warmly embraced the efforts of the government, and I thank you. And please convey my thanks to the opposition as well for their assistance. Because at the end of the day, this is not about the FNM or the PLP. This is about the Bahamas. This is about the quality of life of every Bahamian and the perception of this jurisdiction. And we will not allow those who seek to malign us to paint a picture of the Bahamas that is untrue. And we will fight with every fiber and ounce of our being to preserve, defend, and protect the reputation and the perception of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, because we are a decent country. We are an effective country. And if you let us live, we will compete against you and beat you no matter where you are from, because this, the Bahamas, God's own country. So, we worked hard, and in the space of 1.5 short years, really, in terms of after we put in this process, we had gotten the blessing of the Financial Action Task Force to come in and do an on-site, which they were supposed to have done in April. But then we had the COVID pandemic, and so that has been delayed. However, in the June plenary of the FATF, which they held by virtual means, and which I was able to observe and participate in over the Zoom, the International Cooperation Review Group agreed to reschedule the delayed on-site as soon as the European borders are open and other borders are open that will permit international travel. So we are pressing for the FATF to agree to hold their on-site in time for the FATF to consider whether or not to actually delist the Bahamas at its October 2020 plenary. And I'll point out that the International Cooperation Review Group agreed to amend their usual rule, which is for full face-to-face meetings. So a part of the on-site will be done by virtual means, and the size of the review teams will be cut down. These were all agreed at the plenary. Coming now to the European Union blacklist. Regretfully, based on the Financial Action Task Force grey list, which, but for COVID-19, we think we would have been off in April or early June, but we couldn't because of COVID-19. And so the European Union placed us on their own blacklist based on the fact that we are still on the FATF grey list. Dialogue at the highest levels is being conducted with the European Union through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Bahamas mission in Brussels, Belgium. And there are also developing contacts between Office of the Attorney General and European Commission officials. And we hope that as soon as travel permits, that we and senior technical officers will have a familiarization visit so that they would be able to go and meet face-to-face with their counterparts, so that you would have a face to go with a name or an email address, and you would know the human beings that you're dealing with. And we hope that this will happen as soon as travel to and from the European Union is permissible. But certainly nothing can be done on our part until our borders, our own borders, are fully open in July, as is foreshadowed. Coming now to the judiciary, which is a vitally important aspect. As you know, the judiciary is the third arm of government, and so I am not their minister. I can only speak for them in this place, because they, being a third arm of government, don't come to the second arm to ask for anything like that. So I only to give voice to that which the judiciary has expressed. Let me say that we are blessed right now to have, in terms of the leadership of the Court of Appeal and leadership of the Supreme Court, two distinguished jurists who are really embracing both the opportunities that arise from the challenges we face and are doing everything in their power to make justice cost-effective, accessible, and efficient, as I will explain. The Court of Appeal, led by the new President Sir Michael Barnett, is committed to fully utilizing modern technology in the adjudication of appeals and continues to evolve in its efforts to modernize the judiciary through the use of technology and other cost-saving measures. The new initiatives undertaken by the court starting last year, under the last budget and going into this year, is certainly to introduce, as a result of COVID, a Zoom digital platform. The court has introduced remote hearings by the utilization of Zoom to dispose of urgent criminal and civil cases even during the lockdown. In order to adhere to the best practices, the court has accordingly issued new practice directions, and the practice direction procedurally sets out how digital hearings are to occur. The court's website was also upgraded to allow access to audio transcripts. In response to the COVID-19 shutdown, an amendment of the Court of Appeal rules, the Court of Appeal Amendment Rules 2020, now gives the court legal authority to conduct video conference hearings. This facility, however, is intended to remain as a permanent tool in the arsenal of the court, particularly in view of the overall move by the judiciary, that's Supreme Court, as well as Court of Appeal, and even the Privy Council in London, to embrace digitalization, electronic filing, and case management. Indeed, and this is historic, as late as last week, Monday, an appeal was heard by the Bahamas Court of Appeal, where all the parties' lawyers were physically in England. Not a single lawyer was in the Bahamas. They were in England arguing over the Zoom, the appeal for their client. Now, this may pose some problems for the Bar Association, but it must be presumed that those attorneys in England arguing before our Court of Appeal in the Bahamas were duly called, or specially called to the Bahamas Bar. So I will have to have some discussions with His Lordship the President, because we cannot allow the new technologies to subvert Bahamianization and the protection of the bar. But knowing Sir Michael, he feels as strongly about this as I did, and I'm sure that all of those lawyers were either specially called or were Bahamian lawyers, just happened to be in London. So, but the beautiful thing about it is the lawyers were able to argue by remote means. So, it's going to be possible for lawyers in Freeport not to have to come to Nassau, particularly if you have an indigent client. You're representing an indigent client, and you may say, well, make a request to the court through the Court of Appeal Registrar. We'd like to have a remote hearing because I'm here. The client is in jail, but he doesn't have any money to pay me. I'm doing this pro bono. Could we have a remote hearing? So the potential to save costs and to facilitate justice is enormous. The learned president of the Court of Appeal, in recognition of the need to ensure public access, has caused audio recordings to be available, as I said, on their website. And this is really the significant part, is exploring the means whereby the general public will be able, over the internet, to access and see hearings going on before the Court of Appeal in real time while they are in progress. So, for example, there was a case recently of interest to the Bahamas and the region before the Privy Council. And we were able to go to the Privy Council website, click a tab, and we watched the case. It was an argument from Britain to do with the issue was Boris Johnson's advice to prorogue Parliament. So it was a question about the extent to which the courts would go beyond the GCHQ case, where they applied judicial review to the exercises of the discretion by a minister, which were in the nature of prerogative, meaning relating to the Crown, not to the government itself, but as a minister to declare a whole series of workers to be national security, and therefore they couldn't have a union. And the court reviewed that and said it's an improper exercise of power, and we ended up with a union in the spy center, the GCHQ, the spy center at that time of Britain. And this was a case looking at Boris Johnson's, Prime Minister of Britain, advice to the Queen. I mean, that's very, very high up the scale of prerogative powers. The right of a prime minister to basically explain to the Queen why he wants to prorogue Parliament. And the court reviewed that. And so it was a great constitutional issue, because that's very high up now. You're talking about a prime minister, the first minister of the Crown, talking to the Crown. And the court said, we can look at that too. So we were able to watch that in real time. And this is what the learned president would wish to have available to the public at the Court of Appeal. So can you imagine that? Some person is appealing, means his family don't have to go downtown. They could just hook up a computer, hook into the Zoom, and they could, or press a button, actually, no more Zoom, press a button and see televised their son's appeal or their daughter's appeal. Okay? Yes.
I'm sorry, I appreciate the Attorney General yielding, but the question I meant to actually raise this with the President of the Court of Appeal privately is, I know this enthusiasm for these Zoom meetings and all the rest, but doesn't the Constitution require that the determination of civil rights and obligations should take place in public? And if that is the case, is a Zoom meeting in public?
Well, you know, when you place court proceedings live on your website, yes, and the public has uninhibited access, yes. In public doesn't only mean, ordinarily, there's no court that sits in the dark of night. Every court door, except in matters that are deeply personal and private, rape or children's issues or divorce proceedings, which are all deeply private, every other court proceeding is open to the general public, every other one. And so the fact that as a matter of emergency, if any person who has a legitimate interest wishes to be on the Zoom, they can always apply and get it. But what is going to happen is by placing a portal on the court's website that allows for the general public to have uninhibited access to the public proceedings of the court, because there are matters that come before them that do meet the standard that demand privacy. But other than that, they will have unrestricted access, and yes, there's no constitutional violation. So, I would like to commend the President, Justices of Appeal, on their embrace of technology and transparency. You must bear in mind that once the COVID threat is over, and even as we move to levels of opening up, these courtrooms are going to go back to having in-person hearing with social distancing. This is not question time, with all respect, my friend. I'm trying to get through a speech. Thank you. Recently, Justices of Appeal and clerks of the court received iPads and portable internet devices to further the work of the court. The court also arranged for the Remand Center at the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services to receive a laptop and portable internet device. The same enabled appellants to observe the proceedings and to communicate privately with their counsel. So once again, technology is being used to actually open the court up so that people can actually observe, even from a remote place. As we said, they provided laptops and remote internet, portable internet devices. Yeah, you know. My friend is an irritation in search of an argument, and I'm not going to allow an irritation to search for an argument with me. Digital filings. In collaboration with the Chief Justice, the Court of Appeal permitted counsel in Grand Bahama to file Court of Appeal documents via the Supreme Court Registry. These filings and skeletal submissions would then be electronically sent to the court and digitally transmitted to the Justices of Appeal. An upgrade of the court's already existing case database, the Court of Appeal Information System, CASE, was also expedited to allow for the instantaneous electronic uploading of all court documents and skeleton submissions. So an existing platform designed to put out the court's information has been transformed to allow it to receive certain filings as well for the benefit of the court's actions. The Justices of Appeal now receive their court papers electronically via the use of a Dropbox file hosting services. So instead of getting these massive bundles, which the court is hoping to move away from by having everything digital, they are now moving much closer to that. And then the court papers are then able to be manipulated through note-taking with note-taking by the use of GoodNotes iPad application. The court's cause list is also individualized for each judge by using a Google Diary. The use of the digital diary ensures that each judge only has to be concerned with their allotted matters. In terms of saving costs, it is noteworthy that all the aforementioned advancements were made with little or no cost to the court. In fact, the court's budget would reflect this year a reduction to now just over $2 million. Undoubtedly, it's $2,073,603 is the court's budget, Court of Appeals budget. Undoubtedly, the technology and the other advances made by the court during this budget period can only be described as historic milestones. And to this end, the court was aptly featured in one of the online news dailies for achieving such a feat. Additionally, counsel and attorneys at law and the general public have also praised the court's innovativeness and innovations. The Court of Appeal is without doubt committed to upholding its mission statement and has demonstrated this commitment through its trailblazing transformations. It is anticipated that the court will continue to collaborate with its various stakeholders to achieve even more reforms in the upcoming legal and fiscal year. The Supreme Court and the Office of the Judiciary, similarly the Office of the Judiciary, which is comprised of the Supreme Court and the Magistrates' Courts, have also embraced the use of technology for their hearings. Several initiatives are scheduled to be introduced in this fiscal year that will continue to enhance and transform the efficiency and transparency of the judicial process. In collaboration with the IDB and the Citizens Security and Justice Program, the Supreme Court will be introducing a new integrated case management system. Which will provide, among other things, this part of the notes I received from the registrar, so it said we, and I just corrected it to say no, the Supreme Court, from the registrar of the Supreme Court. I adopt everything that the registrar says. She's a lady of the highest integrity, and she has set forth a record that will. I could have sat here and pretended it was my own words. Okay. Obviously, the leader of the opposition is trying to get into a fight, and I'm praying to the Lord for peace and harmony. Okay, peace and harmony. Okay. And so the Supreme Court will be introducing a new integrated case management system, which will provide, and this is something that I know of and can speak of personally, because it is something that my office has been working on directly with the judiciary now for the past 3 years. This is one of the earliest proposals that I put to the judiciary, that we should move towards electronic filing, as occurred in other jurisdictions. We hosted and traveled, took several of the leading justices away to observe for themselves, and then the present Chief CJ has taken over the whole process, so I no longer play as director role because he has embraced it and made it his own. He in fact led several missions to several Commonwealth and also to the United States countries and to the United States in order to explore options for a new case management system. He has made it his own job, although initially it was our initiative from OAG to push it. And so what we're going to look to see in short order will be an electronic filing feature with a secure web portal that would only allow authorized users, which would be attorneys in good standing or prisoners in the correctional department, to file documents. It will have e-notifications and messaging functionality. It will have integrated digital recording and transcripting of software that will accelerate the pace of transcript production. So what it's going to have is software that will translate the spoken word into the written word. So we won't have to have so many of these actual persons who are actually transcribing documents anymore. They will have to be retrained. They have to be retrained to do the digital transcription and be able to double check what the machine is going to put out. So they'll be performing more of a clerical function to ensure that the transcribing software has accurately transcribed the words and then certifying it to the judge, etc. Now, once implemented, the integrated case management system will remove the judiciary substantially closer to a paperless court system. A request for proposal has been received from several firms, 7 in fact, and the selection process is well underway. That is something that will be done exclusively by the judiciary, of course with technical guidance, etc., in terms of bid evaluation from those who are expert at it in the Ministry of Public Service or Finance, or whatever, you know. The second key initiative of the Office of the Judiciary is the intent to modernize the courts through further digitization and migration of all court documentation and dockets, which will be put into digital frameworks, and to get all of the historic documents all done and filed and cataloged. Another initiative that I inherited from my predecessor in office and that has now been taken over by the judiciary. We continued the policy-based move towards setting up a bail management system. But the Chief Justice and the judiciary have now taken over this process, and they are the ones who are driving it. And the most that I'm hearing is, when are you going to ask your colleagues to go to Parliament and pass the amendments to the Bail Act so that we can bring this on force? Because the bail management system, which will provide an electronic and secure method for persons on bail to check in, to show that they are complying with their bail conditions. It will use biometric fingerprints to verify. So you don't have to go around taking out your passport or anything. You don't have to sign some dirty book that someone will open up, with all kind of fingerprint on it. You don't know who touched it last. You go to a machine, duly sanitize your hand, put your hand in. It will take your fingerprints and say, oh yes, it's Carl Bethel. Yes, it's Fred Mitchell. Yes, it's John Smith. It will also provide alerts to the police and to the court and to counsel should there be breach of bail conditions, and it will create a realistic statistical report for persons on bail, the extent to which they've complied, etc. Plus, it'll give a broad picture of the overall management of bail in the coming months. And this has been taken over by the judiciary. They're driving it. They're ready to go. So hopefully in July, we will pass the amendment to the Bail Act, which will get this fully operational. And additionally, this system is vitally important for the indigent. It's vitally important because it will give an accurate record of persons who, when they come at a time of changing a guard or changing shift, they get told to go off, don't come back here, don't come here to sign up, we can't deal with you. And then they forget, or they find something else that attracts their attention, and they miss signing in for their bail. It also will provide a methodology for indigent prisoners in the Department of Corrections to make their own bail applications electronically. So it's vitally needed. The e-payment court system will also be implemented. And this is really aimed at the magistrates' courts, particularly where there have been great inefficiencies and problems associated with getting payments out to for child maintenance and support, etc. And so this is being actioned with the assistance of certain officers in the magistrates' courts and the Supreme Court, who I'm asked to name: Ms. Natalia Lewis, Brianna Nabi, Alexandria Sherman, and Asia Burrows from the Magistrates Court, Makia Dean, and Esther Pinder from the Supreme Court. Madam President, in consultation with the higher judiciary, which is a term coined by the Privy Council at one point in Hines and the DPP, referring to judges and justices of appeal, but not to magistrates. But in consultation with the higher judiciary, the government has agreed to take further steps to enhance, preserve, and expand the independence of the judiciary. A court services bill is now in the final stages of preparation and will shortly be tabled and hopefully debated and passed. This bill will ensure complete freedom of control by the courts of all court buildings or buildings housing court-related services. It will give the judiciary complete freedom to manage their own annual budget and finances, to employ staff and support services, and to run their own affairs free from the day-to-day influence of any part of the executive. Thus, the indirect influence or choke point of the executive over the judiciary through budgetary and public service controls, particularly public service controls, will be significantly, if not totally, reduced. It is critically important for the integrity of the administration of justice that every means necessary to ensure administrative as well as judicial independence be implemented to ensure public confidence that justice will be impartially administered without fear or favor, particularly when the executive is the defendant, and also when the executive is prosecuting accused persons through the prosecution services. This enhanced independence will greatly ensure that the courts are even more free from any form of indirect pressure from the executive. This enhanced independence will also demand greater accountability, if not allied public scrutiny of the judiciary, who will be called upon by civil society and public opinion to exercise the highest standards of transparency and probity, as well as discipline. Now, there's the Learned Chief Justice, Sir Brian Murray. I am advised that notwithstanding him not being invested upon publication of the list, he is fully entitled to the honorific that has been bestowed on him. He was always Lord before he became Sir. He was Lord Denning to those of us who knew and loved him then. That was our nickname. He was always the Lord, small L Lord. There's only one the Lord, but he was always a Lord. He has expressed his deep commitment to a holistic program which is designed to thoroughly modernize all court systems, to bring greater efficiency for the benefit of all persons seeking legal relief. His Lordship is seeking to implement a new and robust technology platform for all services and facilitate an almost total move from paper-based services to a fully digital platform. You only have a couple paper, one paper copy for the historic record. The goals are to reduce paper and wastage, while also ensuring greater efficiency and responsiveness, saving paper, saving time, saving money by reducing the costs of litigation. Specifically, the new digital platform will include full digital recording of court proceedings, creating a digital record rather than having powers of transcribed testimony, an e-payment system in the magistrates' court aimed at greater efficiency for child maintenance, the new bail management system, e-filing of court proceedings, and on and on. So I commend both the President of the Court of Appeal and the Lord Chief Justice on their sterling efforts to modernize and make more efficient and more publicly accessible all court proceedings. They are ably assisted in their noble design by the digitization process led and spearheaded by my esteemed colleague, Senator Kwesi Thompson, and as part of the overall digitization project. Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. In May 2018, the Independent Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions was established by the amendment creating Article 878A of the Constitution. This was necessary to enhance the perception and the effectiveness of the rule of law by removing any suggestion of influence, improper influence by the executive. Any suggestion of improper influence of the executive. In this vein, it is noteworthy and seminal that a new budget head a new head has been created. A new heading entirely devoted to the Director of Public Prosecutions. In other words, he has now direct responsibility for the management of his own budget, removing any suggestion or possible suggestion that the Office of the Attorney General is controlling how this independent prosecutor is spending his budgeted monies. In this view, Well, you'd be a totally different character. The good former minister says that a separate budget for the director wouldn't stop him from what? Interfering? But it wouldn't stop you. I see. Okay. Well, well, I never did so anyway, and I would never do so, and now I can't do so. Okay, because he has a budget allocation of $2.9 million, which is along the lines of what was allocated towards prosecutorial efforts when they formed an intrinsic part of the Office of the Attorney General's budget. They've now been taken out of the Office of the Attorney General's budget, given their own head. He has his own financial officers, his own accounting people, and he will determine the day-to-day expenditure and priorities of his office within the overall ministry of the Office of the Attorney General, under the umbrella, but not as a part of our budget. So my permanent secretary has no say over how he spends his money. He and his financial officers will do so. Our job is just to say, hold it, bro, you can't go beyond that line, or if you want to do this, you have to go in. If you want to move items between different areas, then you're going to have to go through a process and to guide and assist, but not to direct. It is noteworthy, though, that the independence of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has been even further manifested by the fact that he will, as of next month, July, move into entirely separate offices, separate and apart from the Office of the Attorney General. He will have his own office on the top floor of Charlotte House, right there on Parliamentary, Charlotte Street South, opposite Bank, not quite, opposite the Registrar General's office in Charlotte House, and that Charlotte House extends all the way out to, you can see the Bank of the Bahamas on your west side, etc. So it's a very large building. He has the whole top floor, and it's in walking distance of all of the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal. So no longer will our prosecutors have to be bussed to and from downtown from the Office of the Attorney General. Sometimes our women prosecutors being harassed as they stand waiting on the bus by either persons that they just were involved in prosecuting, or by their family members, or by their, quote, associates. Okay? No more. They will leave court, and if our prosecutors have any fear, the DPP will be able to send his security details, or the security detail attached to his office down there to escort prosecutors if there should be any fear of anyone messing with them, and they're all within walking distance of their home base. So this is a serious advance in justice. Okay, so I must note on behalf of the DPP that we have a serious issue that applies both on the civil and on the prosecutorial side, that there is a high level of attrition of public officers, legal officers, because they get picked off, they get offered much more by the private sector, they can be paid a lot higher, and so, we're also finding that while many police and defense force officers get law degrees, and in the past we were able to have them seconded to assist us as part of the legal team, of late the defense force and the police are very reluctant to do that because of their own manpower needs. So even though they have attorneys who would wish to come over, there's been a lot of resistance to that. So, all I can say is that I would like to encourage as many younger attorneys and law students to seriously consider putting in a few good years in the Office of the Attorney General or in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We also, and this was an initiative again of the former government, which we helped to complete, which was the Office of the Public Defender. And I would like to commend my predecessor in office on having the vision to start the ball rolling, to set up this Office of Public Defender. That's the Honorable Alison Maynard Gibson, having the vision to start the ball rolling and set this up initially. And we've continued with it. It is a wonderful office that provides free legal services to indigent persons charged with criminal offenses. So in addition to the court's ability to give Crown briefs in serious cases, sometimes in not so serious cases, they assign and call for the services of the Public Defender's Office. And particularly where, there's many a judge in the past, I know, from my days practicing, who when they saw an unrepresented indigent defendant and could not find counsel to represent and didn't have the ability to give a Crown brief, those cases just kept getting adjourned indefinitely. Because, no judge in there, with a heart is going to say, I believe from what I see here, there's no case, but this person can't represent themselves. And he'll get over, and so they would just adjourn. That has stopped now because there is a venue where the judge looks at the brief and looks at the file and says, I think this person could do well if they were properly represented, and they have their clerks call down and get one of the public defenders to come and take the brief. So even in non-capital cases, they exercise the jurisdiction. Certainly, the Office of the Attorney General does nothing more than to host their budget and discuss issues with the board, which is an independent board, and do everything to facilitate. But we don't assign them anywhere; it's the courts that do so. So they call it the firm, They call the Office of the Public Defenders. They say, this is the firm. And so the firm has positively established itself in the administration of justice. And the numbers of briefs given to these 4 attorneys who are presently there, and we need some more. And I must at this time commend Mr. Stanley Rule, who is the Chief Public Defender, for an excellent job. The excellent job that he is doing and has done in marshalling the scarce resources of only 3 other lawyers to do such a wonderful job for so many indigent and poor defendants. They don't always win, but they always go down fighting. And that is what is important. I don't know. To be truthful, Stanley Rule was a student of my deceased partner, Willie Moss. We sort of ran parallel firms. So although it was Bethel, Moss & Co., I didn't run Willie's practice and he didn't run mine. And Stanley Rule was Willie's student until the time of Willie's death. So that's why I knew Stanley. No, I didn't get him his job. He had the job. He had the job from my predecessor's time. Okay, it wasn't, yeah, okay, so, but he's good. He's well trained. He was well trained by Willie Moss. And Willie Moss, for those, God bless the dead, and for those who knew Willie Moss, was a positively brilliant attorney. He was one of the most brilliant criminal defenders ever to bestride the legal stage. And the one thing, I did one case with him, and I was amazed that he could sit there with his briefcase on the chair, cross-examining someone, and record every word in the most perfect script, perfect handwriting. How he could do that, cross-examine someone, hear what they say, write their answer down, and come in real time with the next question, and then get the answer that perfectly written down. I've never been able to see how anyone has done it, but he had that unique quality. So the Public Defender's Office has received a total of 230 briefs from its formation. Of this number, 173 were received from the Supreme Court Registry and 57 from the Court of Appeals Registry. So what I tell you, the judges themselves have embraced this office and send cases that are deserving to them. So it has nothing to do with me. And so I'm very happy to see, and I commend them. And I commend the judiciary I tell a man, y'all got to stop loading my defenders down, because when y'all keep sending briefs, when someone wants to walk in to get a case, it's difficult for them to find time to deal with the walk-in clients. But, you get justice one way or the other. They are helping in the administration of justice in an amazing way. Coming to the Industrial Tribunal, and I always hear calls from my good and distinguished brother, political brother, Dion Folks, as Minister of Labour, for the Industrial Tribunal to be made a division of the Supreme Court. And and this is a very big bugbear for the union movement. And I keep trying to say, but how can I do that? I know it's a serious question. How can we do this and prevent Supreme Court costs type things to apply? How can we do this? Can we not transfer elements of the court's original jurisdiction in a way that doesn't violate Hines and the DPP? That doesn't mean that you are giving something that only someone with constitutional tenure to someone who doesn't have constitutional tenure, but do it in a way that allows the tribunal to be more effective in the way in which it can police, if not fully inform. And so I look forward to having a dialogue with my colleague and with the labor movement, and also with the judiciary, to see if we can devise a way to enhance, because at the end of the day, the beauty of the tribunal is that John Smith can go there and represent him or herself. Period. You see? Period. And so, so why take something that works in a certain way, is accessible in a certain way, to someone recently cast onto the unemployment line, and give it a stature that causes, because that stature causes all sorts of other things to get in people's heads. And so we need to have a discussion. Let's find out what the optimum we can get. Let's give, if we can, the power to enforce, but preserve the accessibility that I, the citizen, can walk in. Okay, so let's go on. But I must commend the president, Indira Francis. She is just like a turbine. She works so hard. She has totally cleared the backlog of cases she met with before she became president. She has revolutionized the services. She came afterwards and she didn't beat the judiciary, because she caught me by surprise. She has implemented in the Industrial Tribunal one of the systems that and we had judges down to look at, to bring in the digitization of court filings. But she's got it. It's called the Courier Suite. It was developed at the behest of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and it's a company called Apex, which is Caribbean citizens. They're from Barbados. Okay, this is our system. It's a Caribbean system, and so we were looking at that, and we went straight there for Korea first. But the current CJ is looking all around the world. That's fine. But the learned president of the Industrial Tribunal done get it and installed. And Rionda Delaveau, Godet. Let's get that is remember. Don't forget the Delaveau. She was the very first counsel representing a client on the 12th of August 2019 to digitally file everything. So I would like to commend the very diligent, hard-working president of the Industrial Tribunal and Ms. Cadet on this wonderful achievement. And, throughout Hurricane Dorian and all of the lockdowns, the Industrial Tribunal didn't have to close. because it didn't have to open, because it had all the digital facilities for every single service needed. The Industrial Tribunal is also working on the construction of a new Industrial Tribunal court in Grand Bahama, because Dorian flooded one, and we agreed on a new rental at a different site, a little higher ground. And so it is with great pride that the new location that the government has provided will allow the tribunal to continue to serve the great people of the wonderful island of Grand Bahama in the coming years and months. Similarly, the industrial courts have been relocated to Safri Square, and the extent to which she was, one of the courts was in what is called, used to be called the Swift Justice Building. Now I think it's Annex 2 or something of the Supreme Court. That has also been moved to Safri Square, and so it's all getting ready with new wiring and new services. Now we come to the Registrar General's department. It is very important. If the Attorney General's office stands at the crossroads or the heart of governance, then the valves that run that heart are to be found in the Registrar General's office, because they are responsible for everything. The Registrar General's office is the repository of the social and economic history of this country. It is the place where every birth is or ought to be recorded. Every marriage, every divorce, every adoption, every death, your land transactions, everything you do to buy and sell that needs to be a public document or publicly accessible is to be found there. So all land transactions, mortgages, you name it. And every structure of human business relationships or human, in a sense, if one uses foundations, management of finances or management of spending or tools and equipment, these are all lodged in that office. So it's a vitally important office, and many government agencies have to have connection to it because for their own purposes. So for example, the Ministry of Finance, as a result of the matter I'm going to speak about next, is hacked. The Ministry of Finance, I cut off all access because I ordered it cut off because there were some other attempts to intrude from some strange places way in the Far East, and not China and not the European Union, somewhere in the middle. And finance is crying bloody murder because they have to have access to the business license information, not beneficial ownership information, and that's not housed with the Registrar General. That's a separate database in a separate location managed by different people on a different platform. But they needed to have company information to see whether the companies were in good standing when they were applying for their business license. That's the critical thing, okay? Not to find out who the directors are or anything else, but they needed to have it. And so it is vitally important to many government agencies. National Insurance needs to know births, deaths, marriages for their purposes. So, you know, recently you'd be aware there was a hack. Evidently, according to the preliminary police report, it would have started somewhere between October, the end of October, and February. They're trying to pin down the period. It wasn't like a one-day event, though. And the system apparently just did not generate any warnings, so you wouldn't know. We are in a position where we have to acknowledge that the world is a dangerous place. We do what we think is required today, and the technology we do today is probably obsolete by 3 months as soon as we've implemented it. And hackers are all over the place. They are hacking anything. They hack the U.S. Social Security system as well. So we have to redouble our efforts. We have to do more, and we have to keep doing more. And I see my distinguished Senator Thompson, who is leading the government's digitization efforts through his ministry, nodding his head in agreement, because no matter what we do today, we're going to have to look at it tomorrow. That's just how rapidly this thing goes. But, I'd like to look at blockchain, different servers for different functions, so that if someone gets access to one part of the registry on one platform, whether it's a separate server or in a blockchain, and someone is able to hack in, they'll only have access to that small portion. If it's blockchain, even better, because the information is then distributed according to who inputs it. And if you hack in, you can only ever land in one of those nodes, and you can only get the little bit of information in relation to the whole that is in that node. If you get into one of those ledgers, but you don't ever get the full ledger if you have a blockchain. So we have to look at all of these things. Mr. Thompson, I expect all hands on deck. As soon as the police identify what the problem and where and how, that we move immediately. And no matter what we do. Yes, I know, but now we have some talks. But the point is that whatever we do, bear in mind, it's like water. Water, you put a water in your hand and try hold it. Challenge anyone to hold water in the palm of their hands. It cannot do. And this is the problem in terms of dealing with hackers. That almost no matter what you do, they'll find their way to worm their way in. So let us do what we have to do, and let's get it done the right way. We are looking to bring in from a proven provider who was provided in a sister Caribbean region, a very comprehensive corporate management e-portal, a version of that system, not the same, one that is written specifically for the Bahamas. It was approved by Cabinet earlier this year, and so we will be moving over the next months to fund the contract and to bring the provider in and to bring in a corporate filing and management software package accessible to the industry, which will capture all of the historic companies which are not captured by the present system that we met in place. Only from 2015 onwards can you use the electronic portal. We will have a comprehensive portal that will capture all of the information. And because we're going to be doing this, we have to make sure it is buttressed by the highest quality of digital protection. So we have to seriously look at that issue going forward once we find out what went wrong the last time. The Registrar General's Office, and this comes from Minister Thompson, has been chosen to participate in the Bahamas Government Digitization Pilot Program. The target date for this to start was July 2020, but that has to be pushed back a bit. But we'd like to be able, through that process, to allow people to apply for birth certificates online as a first step. So the idea of having to come and bring the baby, sit down in the Registrar General's office, that small little foyer area, waiting for hours, baby crying, right? God up if you got to breastfeed, because then, you got to tent up and all that sort of stuff. And every John Q. public walking in and out, and you and your child, you don't know what, So we want to reach a stage where something as basic as that can be available digitally to avoid the pain and travail that young mothers have to go through so often, sitting up in that office. So we also will see, we hope, over the next course of this year, a total transformation in the way in which services are offered in the department, as I indicated, starting with the corporate registry, moving through the program of digitization to birth records, and then other records that would be important. Say someone needs a copy of their marriage certificate. needs to get a copy of their grandfather's death certificate. All of these things will eventually be made available to the public with the appropriate identifiers and appropriate safeguards that they will be able to get this information. So, Mr. I'm looking for a death certificate so I can play like I'm somebody. Ain't gonna be able to do that. Okay? Okay. Let me, though, say that I must commend the new Registrar General. She was acting for the last year or so, Sally Ann Lockhart Pratt, and she was last week fully confirmed as Registrar General, and I'd like to commend her for the outstanding work that she is doing in helping us to bring this office to where it should be. Also, Mr. Wellington Smith, he is a computer genius and whiz kid. In the back, you hardly see him. Good church man. Solid officer. And I would commend him. Also, Mr. James Taylor and Mr. David Rowe. Now, lastly, I'm coming to, once I'm back to the FATF stuff, and we at the Attorney General's office, I'm happy to say, have now established a compliance unit to implement fully the Non-Profit Organizations Act and the Register of Beneficial Ownership Act. Like I said, we have a separate register of beneficial ownership, and financial aid institutions and corporate service providers have been uploading. And we're down to the last few smaller ones who are uploading, and we have a serviceable database, separate and secure, totally off anybody's grid, etc. And this unit we set up will ensure and check the veracity of information by on-sites. We'll ensure that non-profit organizations are registering with the Registrar General's office, and then check the veracity of the required statement that they have to say that they are maintaining TIC, financial records. And this unit will go and check, not to see how much you got, not to see where your money coming from, but only to see that you are keeping financial records, just in case we get some information and we have to send in a formal inquiry. And so this unit will police the Non-Profit Organizations Act, and it will police the Register of Beneficial Ownership Act. It is headed up by very experienced attorney, Ms. Tiffany Moss, a daughter of my first constituency, Holy Cross, more particularly Nassau Village. Tiffany Moss, a young girl from Nassau Village. She has risen through the ranks she's senior counsel in my office now, and she is now going to be the head of the compliance unit for the non-profit organization and for the Register of Beneficial Ownership. She's an experienced assessor. She recently served as a Caribbean Financial Action Task Force assessor for the Cayman Islands and served with distinction. This daughter of Nassau Village, don't ever tell me nothing good could come from Nassau. Don't ever tell me that. Okay, and so proud of Tiffany. Of course, she's ably assisted by others in the overall Office of the Attorney General, and she is a highly respected member of our staff. And so, Madam President, I trust that by this short canvas of different agencies under the aegis of the Office of the Attorney General, under our umbrella, if you will, that people get a better sense of what we're doing and the goals we seek to achieve. Let me conclude. Despite the contraction of our economy and the reduction of our budgets, the Office of the Attorney General and all its agencies has already demonstrated resiliency and our will to continue our fight for justice for all persons throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam President and fellow senators, yes, because of a terrible natural disaster, and a catastrophic pandemic. The time is out of joint. The state and our world are out of joint and economically crippled. Oh, though much is taken, much yet abides. We can and we will prevail. For the sake of the Bahamas and all her peoples, let us thank the Lord that... My last sentence. I start again as I get to conclude. For the sake, the state and the world, the Bahamas and the world, we are all out of joint. We are economically hobbled. But though much has been taken, much abides. We can and we will prevail. For the sake of the Bahamas and all of her peoples, let us thank the Lord that by his might we were born to set it right. Thank you, Madam President.
The chair recognizes Senator Sawyer.
Why would you suggest that? No one on this side.
Am I on? Good morning, Madam President and fellow senators. Once again, I am indeed grateful for the opportunity to stand again in this honorable place today. By God's grace, God Almighty, for providing me with the strength to be here.
I'm glad you were here when I was praising you.
Madam President, I beg leave, first of all, to say a belated Happy Father's Day to all the fathers of our Bahama land. I hope that many of them had a great day with their families eating crab and rice. No. But before I begin my contribution to this year's budget, I beg leave to offer my sincerest thanks and appreciation to all the healthcare workers who have been and continue to be on the front lines of the current global health pandemic known as COVID-19.
Can we keep the murmur down, please?
It would also be remiss of me not to offer my gratitude to the law enforcement agencies, namely the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces, and other essential workers who worked around the clock, risking their own health to ensure that the Bahamas were safe and continue to run smoothly. I also like to take this opportunity, Madam President, to convey my sincerest condolences and sympathies to three families. In the first instance, the family of the late Doral Sturp, who, along with her husband, Mr. Leroy Sturp, were the owners and proprietor and operators of the Red Baron restaurant, who passed away recently. This restaurant used to be almost like a informal F&M headquarters for us during the late the 70s, the 80s, and into the 90s. And many times all the aspiring candidates and politicians of that era who ran for the F&M would congregate in that restaurant in the evening.
Anyway, they invited you chaplain first.
Okay. So my sincere condolences, and they remain steadfast, strong supporters of the Free National Movement, and even their children remain up to this day. So my condolences to them. I also like to give my condolences to the family of the late Dr. Patrick Roberts, affectionately known to me as Patty. Dr. Roberts was a noted pediatrician, and he attended two of my kids. Also, he was also known especially was that as a sports medicine doctor. I think I got that correct, right? Sports medicine doctor, and accompanied many of our Olympic teams abroad. Okay, but more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, he was my former patrol leader in the Boy Scouts at the government high school in the late 50s and early 60s, and Patty was my friend. And lastly, Madam President, I'd like to offer my condolences to the family of the late Michael Mickey Turner. Mickey was my friend. He was a noted attorney, businessman, insurance executive, mentor to many, many young lawyers and other ones. But more importantly, he was an historian. He knew a lot about the local political history of this country. He was Mr. Know-it-all. And I say he was Mr. Know-it-all. He knew everything. And just more recently, about several months ago, before we went into lockdown, many of us had mentioned him. It's about time that Mickey, you write your history of the local politics of the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. I hope he did, and I think this morning he's being funeralized this morning at Christchurch Cathedral. And so to his family, I say my sincerest condolences. Madam President, while we have had over 100 cases of the virus, and we sadly lost almost a dozen of our brothers and sisters due to the virus, in comparison to the rest of the world, the Bahamas had fared extremely well as a result of the swift and decisive policies implemented by this minister-led administration. Madam President, there are no two ways around it. As many first world nations battle this pandemic, they experience countless cases of the virus, strained hospital facilities, and a staggering number of deaths, while our beautiful nation has remained a beacon of hope among a world saturated with negative news. Madam President, I found it very troubling to hear a very senior attorney in this country make the outright stupid claim that many COVID-19 protocols put in place were due to political reasons. It is saddening to think that someone could be so ignorant as to think that any administration, regardless of color, would politicize matters of life and death. This administration acted quickly to protect the lives of citizens in the face of very real and very deadly disease. It would appear that because the Bahamas has been relatively successful in handling this pandemic, and our country was not overwhelmed with infected citizens, that this has created a sense of arrogant irrationality for this gentleman, who has done nothing but criticize and has offered absolutely no viable solution of his own. What he has done, however, is, in hindsight of every decision, was to condemn and talk in circles. Madam President, the Bahamian people are tired of this idle talk. What's even more troubling is that this individual is a former and possibly maybe a future candidate for the side opposite. And I do hope he runs again so we can beat him again. He is a clear example of those who oppose simply for the sake of doing so, and clearly demonstrates that he nor his colleagues, comprising the quickly now defunct PLP COVID-19 task force, I don't hear about that anymore, we're ready to sit in the seat of decision making. I am sure I speak for many Bahamians when I say that I'm thankful that this FNM minister-led administration is in the seat of government for a time like this. A government that can be trusted to make the best decisions on behalf of the Bahamian people with honesty and transparency. We have not, Madam President, we have not been perfect. However, no Bahamian can say that we have not been upfront and direct with the public. I wonder, Madam President, what policies the side opposite would have taken to combat this virus. Given the constant flip-flopping, backtracking, and purely baseless criticisms they have leveled against the current government. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused economic...
Please don't interrupt the speaker.
As many would have been laid off, experienced cuts, and even worse, Madam President, lost their jobs. This situation was not unique to the Bahamas, and I would venture to say that due to our dependence on the international tourism market, that our country's challenges were further augmented by this crisis. Madam President, I guess that devious attorney and members of the side office always believed that it was this administration that caused our largest tourism source market of the United States to experience great numbers of the virus. And that it was this administration that somehow locked down the U.S. cities and prevented tourists from jumping on planes and traveling to the Bahamas. Madam President, in the words of our Attorney General, and he says, it boggles the mind at how disingenuous and absolutely insincere the opposition could be.
Irritation in search of an argument.
Madam President, given the fragility of our public system that has experienced significant challenges over the years, it was incumbent upon the government of the Bahamas to ensure that this system was not unnecessarily overwhelmed. It was the duty of this administration to ensure that we not needlessly lose hundreds or possibly thousands of our citizens due to this deadly disease. There are those, Madam President, that read one or two health articles, observe the respective responses of countries around the world, and try to contrast foreign realities to that of our nation. But the truth of the matter is, we are a nation with unique challenges of our own and a very peculiar geographic makeup. And there was no one-size-fits-all solution to this pandemic. We could not simply use a cookie-cutter approach to the handling of this invisible enemy of COVID-19. As a nation of 700 islands and thousands more rocks and keys, we had to craft policies that would prevent a systemic outbreak in our island chain. Madam President, a former PLP senator in this place and former Attorney General recently lauded the government's swift handling of the COVID-19 panic for its initial discovery in our country. And she also went on to praise the former Minister of Tourism, the former Minister of Health, and also the current Minister of Health for being so successful in the way how they handle this pandemic. But more importantly, she gave praise to that magnificent seven who was part of the exquisite and professional task force, LTAIM, led by Dr. Dal Regis. So where's your task force? The current opposition, however, continues to be blind to the fact that things could very well have been much worse had we not acted in a quick and deliberate fashion. Madam President, in spite of all the challenges that we have faced as a nation, we press on. We press on with the hope of a much brighter brighter tomorrow, standing shoulder to shoulder as citizens who will emerge from these crises and transition to opportunity. Madam President, today I rise to second this 2020-2021 budget, and allow me to say from the outset of my contribution that I am in full support of this budget, and I'd like to commend the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, together with his team, for doing such a wonderful job in bringing this budget to Parliament. This is a budget that focuses on health and safety of Bahamians, provides adequate social support to the most vulnerable members of our society. It seeks to stabilize the domestic economy and employment, and it also seeks to accelerate much-needed government reforms. The past 3 years have been filled with tragedy and uncertainty as we continue to grapple with the effects of a health crisis that has now ballooned into a financial crisis. This has been compounded with the ongoing reconstruction efforts in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian. Hurricane Dorian was the strongest storm ever to pass through the Atlantic Ocean since the 1850s and drastically changed the lives of our brothers and sisters to the north forever. Bahamians on the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama are still reeling from this storm that sat on top of our northern jewels for almost 36 hours. When Dorian left us, Madam President, he also left behind an invoice of more than $3.4 billion in damages. Madam President, opposition members, especially in the other place, would want the Bahamian public to believe that these two catastrophic events have done nothing to change our current state of affairs or haven't created a new way of life for many. I also suspect that comments by opposition senators will be filled with most of the same baseless and reckless assertions. This administration is not seeking to hide the harsh reality that we now face as a nation. The opposition, for some strange reason, chooses to ignore the facts. It leaves me astonished, Madam President, that educated men and women comprising the opposition will willfully craft speeches and press releases that not only present obscene falsehoods and distort reality, but also go against their own gut knowledge and academic wisdom. In other words, Madam President, they should know better. In case they are unaware or just choose to be ignorant, the Bahamas has had to face two dramatic events, both within the same fiscal year. In case they have forgotten or lost a sense of time and reality, Hurricane Dorian made landfall on our shores in September of last year with the COVID-19 pandemic in hot pursuit, arriving some 5 months later. Madam President, in not more than 7 months in the 2019-2020 fiscal year, we experienced two of the most disruptive events that any administration in this country has ever faced. Madam President, for those who say that this is a bold statement to make, they should know that I, along with many of us here, have lived through the Pinling, Ingram, and Christie administrations. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this current minister-led F&M government in 3 years has had to tackle more than any of those gentlemen did in their collective 50 years in office. Yep. What we face today is the alarming situation where almost every national economy in the world has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the Bahamas was of no exception. The global economy has basically been brought to its knees, while our largest tourist market and trading partner, the United States, is on pace to experience record levels of unemployment and sharp economic declines. The global economy is set to contract by 5.2%, which is said to be the deepest recession in decades. Madam President, it seems as if the side opposite, primarily leader of opposition business in this place, fails to believe the facts as presented by this government. But what I find difficult to believe is that this all-wise, highly trained attorney could comfortably utter some of the most juvenile and embarrassing statements in the history of our politics outside this country, this chamber. But through you, Madam President, may I remind you that the international financial community is ever watching and listening. I wonder if the all-wise leader of opposition business believes that the world's top economists, who have projected that just about every region will be subject to substantial economic downturns. I wonder, Madam President, if that this all-wise and all-knowing leader of opposition business has kept abreast of European news. You, my friend, where countries are now in each other's throats for their fair share of European Union financing as their economies have come to a near standstill. We will signally, Madam President. He didn't believe the words of his own deputy leader, the Member of Parliament. $2 billion. The Member of Parliament for Exomen Regulator, when he quoted that he expected unemployment to be in the range of 50%, and they'd expected the country's debt to GDP ratio to exceed 100%. Madam President, the leader of the opposition business in this place must have lost it when his deputy leader then advised the government to borrow up to $2 billion in order to stabilize the economy of the Bahamas. He must have gone absolutely ballistic with this deputy leader. Then stated in no uncertain terms that now is not time to worry about debt ratios. Isn't it interesting, Madam President? Isn't it interesting that the Shadow Minister of Finance and the chief opposition spokesman on all things financial within the country would make such statements and then quickly backtrack? I suspect that the leader of opposition business in this state quickly whipped him, the green and novice deputy leader, and told him to get on board. He's the opposition talking point. Get on board. It must be depressing for the PLP deputy leader to have the flip-flop and now choke on the bile of untruth while ignoring his own conventional economic wisdom. It will be interesting to hear the contributions of the side opposite, particularly the youngest senators. Particularly the younger senators, whom the senators expect to have an objective and innovative mindset. Will they follow the footsteps of their superiors, or will they stand courageously and discuss the facts as they see them, but at home and abroad? We can rip you in the sheet. Madam President, the side opposite has begun to sound like a broken record, singing from the same hymn sheet during every budget presentation over the last few years, using terms like uninspiring and unimaginative. The half-baked and poorly drafted response to this government's budget presentation was somehow quickly scripted and magically prepared before even having the opportunity to fully analyze the merits or demerits of this budget. You see how quickly after we presented it, went at the press conference and tried to criticize it. This clearly shows that they have no care or concern in understanding the facts and presenting them to the constituents and supporters. But they simply wish to oppose and criticize while demonstrating that they will say and do anything to return the power. You all got another 7 more years out there. Madam President, the political tactic of the side opposite throughout the entire budget debate has been to focus on borrowing during this fiscal term and during the course of our administration. You know, Madam President, you can fool some of the people. You can fool some of the people all the time. You can even fool some of the people some of the time. But one thing you can never do is fool all the people all the time. It's my humble request that senators opposite demonstrate to the Bahamian people when they rise on their feet in this place during this debate what sort of mystical and supernatural economic plan they would have employed had they been in office to combat the economic fallout of these disasters. After experiencing the financial blow of Hurricane Dorian and the subsequent economic knockout of COVID-19, inquiring minds want to know what you would have done in the span of 6 months, from September 2019, when Hurricane Dorian ruthlessly violated our country, to March 2020, when emergency COVID orders were implemented, to somehow magically increase government revenues, to stabilize the economy, maintain employment levels, and provide funding to every Bahamian home, all without borrowing a single red penny. Inquiring minds wants to know, Madam President, given all the political spin doctrine and attempts at masking the truth, this is one economic fairy tale that I am desperate to listen to. Madam President, as I mentioned before, Hurricane Dorian cost over $3.4 billion in damages, and due to the effects of COVID-19, we are projecting a revenue shortfall of over $970 million. Madam President, a useful opposition would outline clearly for the Bahamian people how they would have dealt with this $4 billion hit to our economy. Madam President, if I was a betting man, I would venture to say that they are unable to do so because they have no vision and they themselves are fully aware of the serious economic challenges we face. Where borrowing is a necessary facet of life at this time, in order to quickly stabilize our economy and bring relief to our citizens, or to put it in terms that they will understand. I repeat the words of their deputy leader, Mr. Chester Cooper, and I quote, Ivan, now is not the time to worry about debt ratios. This is the time to bring relief to our people. End of quote.
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
One side he moved.
One side he moved. The other side he said something else. Madam President, through this health pandemic, this administration has ensured that every member of the civil servants has remained employed. That is amazing, you know. In other countries and in other governments. In other countries and other governments, you know what some governments did? They some sort of cut salaries. They all, in other words, parts of the world. In other parts of the world. Okay, in other parts of the world, you know that. All right. Okay, all right. But we haven't done anything. We've kept everybody employed. And they always get
Gentlemen,
at the end of the day.
please allow them.
That's what a good government is doing. A good caring government. This African government has done that. All right? All right? And, okay? And has not introduced any additional taxes. You would also recall that well before this pandemic, the government's revenue had already taken a huge hit due to economic engines of Abaco and Grandmama being severely impacted due to Dorian. Madam President, this government ensured that these disaster zones did not have to worry about paying normal taxes as they attempted to rebuild and return their lives to some sense of normalcy. And again, through you, Madam President, with the country already losing millions of dollars due to Hurricane Dorian, and just 6 to 9 months later, losing millions more to COVID-19, I must question the side opposite as to exactly how they will seek to quickly stabilize our economy and provide up to the thousands of payments. How would the government be able to continually provide critical public services to the people of the Bahamas, such as health care, pay our police, defense force, prison officers, teachers, and other civil servants? Madam President, as a party wishing the government, they only wish to govern. That's only a wish, nothing else. These are the questions that must be answered by the opposition during this debate. Madam President, this current government even ensured that many self-employed, listen to this, that many self-employed individuals who would have normally not qualified for NIB benefits receive funds to assist them during this difficult time. They love to say, Madam President, that the assistance rendered by NIB was no big deal, that it was their NIB contributions in any event. But, Madam President, we all know that NIB was in no position to pay out millions of dollars in benefits that it did in the space of 6 to 8 weeks. This government allocated additional tax revenue to that agency to ensure that every payment would be able to obtain assistance if necessary. Let me assist, Madam President, Senator's opposite, and say that we have not hid from the fact that we are seeking parliamentary approval to borrow $1.3 billion. We are quite aware that this is indeed the largest fiscal deficit that the country has faced. But these are also the most peculiar and most difficult times that this country has ever faced. If you listen carefully, the PLP is slowly shifting their tactics and adopting a sad story, telling the Bahamian people that they too had arrogance during their time in office, which all pale in comparison to the pure hell that Dorian unleashed on our country. One need only to take a trip to Sweden's Key, East Grandmama, or Marsh Harbor, and the Abaco Keys to get a clear understanding of what we as the government faced from September last year to now. Madam President, no matter how much the side opposite grows desperate for attention and seeks to distort facts with oaths of statements that even some of their own supporters find to be completely ludicrous, there's one fact that they simply cannot deny, and that is, it was this government financial discipline that allowed us the fiscal headroom to be able to push back against these crises. For this reason, Madam President, we must commend the nation's Minister of Finance. While we were lambasted for focusing too much on the numbers, what they could not understand or simply refuse to acknowledge was the fiscal prudence. Remember, the fiscal prudence was necessary, and we will continue to be necessary, and will continue to be necessary in order to ensure the continued stability of our economy. While they misled the Bahamian public on borrowing numbers, they should also tell the Bahamian people that it was this government in the 2018-2019 budget that reduced the projected deficit to $284 million, and the 2019-2020 fiscal year reduced the projected deficit to $137 million, the lowest in a decade. We were well on our way to achieving our fiscal targets. This minister's administration passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act that implemented principles of fiscal management and increased both parliamentary and public scrutiny of public finances. The all-wise leader of opposition business said, however, that the PLP will not commit to leaving this Fiscal Responsibility Act in place if they are ever elected. I say again, Madam President, that the international and domestic financial communities are watching, and it's our administration that has showed that we are serious about managing the country's finances in a responsible manner. Senator Mitchell thought that he struck gold with his childish acronym, IMF, saying that this means it's the minister's fault. But Madam President, I think a more accurate interpretation of IMF should be, I must forget. Because he must have forgotten, Madam President, issues like BAMSI and the Butch Star General Building. He must have forgotten about these issues where the payment taxes did not come on top. He must have forgotten about these issues where millions of dollars of the Bayman people's money were pointedly wasted. But yet they speak in that other place about enhancing revenue and being bold. And while our precious dollars were wasted, that could have utilized in more productive areas of our economy. Well, Madam President, whose fault was this? Madam President, in spite of what we are facing at the moment, this government has been working for the Bayman people nonetheless. This administration has already delivered on several of its key priorities. One, when it comes to ease of doing business, Madam President, the government has delivered on a 48-hour business license renewal turnaround time and significantly reduced the number of days required to register property conveyances. The government is currently working to implement other sweeping reforms across a number of areas that should cause the Bahamas to see a great leap in its standing on the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report. With respect to the education of our children, Madam President, the government set out on a path to increase literacy rates, and we have seen the GLAT language arts results steadily improving. And this administration is also well on track to seeing the full implementation of this universal preschool program. There has been an additional 1,500 students enrolled in the program during the 2019-2020 period. Madam President, we are also seeing tremendous progress with the government's energy reform key priority, where solar energy projects have already been implemented at the National Stadium, the Anatole Rogers High School, and Ragged Island. A solar car park is about to be installed at the office of the Prime Minister, and a solar battery storage system is being planned for the T.G. Glover Primary School. Madam President, allow me to commend the Minister of Works, Mr. Honorable Desmond Bannister, and his team at BPL for assuring us that during this summer, that as far as power generation is concerned, that we would have enough power to sustain us during this summer, as opposed to last summer. We have ample generation power. It doesn't mean that we may not have no power outages every now and then, but they may be due to other things, but not because of the power generation. We have gotten sufficient. There'll be no load shedding. There will be no load shedding. All right? No load shedding. We have ample backup power, generation power. Okay? All right. Thank you. With respect to the Overdale Regeneration Project, Madam President, the side opposite has historically represented this area for decades. But it is this current administration that demonstrated that while they are all about talk, we are about changing lives, Madam President. Several residents and businesses in the community have already received tax concession across a number of categories to the tune of $1.2 million. And a small business development center has already graduated over 50 residents from the Overdale area from its small business mentorship program. These individuals received grants to start their businesses, leading to the creation of 142 jobs and collective business turnover of approximately 4.8 million. That is what you call real action, Madam President. And let me commend, while I'm at it, let me commend the chairman of the Water and Sewage Corporation, the Honorable Adrian Gibson, and the staff, and the staff at the Water and Sewage Corporation. In 3 short years after coming in the government, they gave Cat Island potable water. And they had a member of parliament down there for almost 18 years. Who has been the Minister of Works? And could not even give them potable water. Shame on them. I'm almost ready to recommend that he go run down to Cat Island to get ready. Okay, all right. Okay. Because those people down in Cat Island like him for water. All right. Okay. Because he ran down there and lay pipe. All right.
Order, please. Order.
But he should be shamed.
Senators, can we have some order, please?
18 years to get water. Shame. People. That's right. Madam President, before the COVID-19 panic, we also saw record tourism arrivals to our shores, with over 7 million tourists traveling to the Bahamas in 2019. The side opposite will probably try to take credit for this as well. But Madam President, this government has been working for the Bahamian people regardless of what they say. Madam President, while they continue to lead pep rallies, the work of this administration must continue. We are already seeing the deputy leader, censored and muzzled, having to walk back on his statements regarding the true state of fiscal realities. It will be interesting to hear from, listen to me, it will be interesting to hear from the young senators opposite, Senators Sweeting and Colby Davis. Will they also criticize their budget and call it uninspiring and unimaginative? I wonder if, Madam President, if Senator Colby Davis considers a $55 million allocation for the expansion of small businesses uninspiring? Well, tell that to the thousands of budding entrepreneurs that will benefit from this program and possibly spark new industries in our country. That's what I call inspiring, Madam President. I wonder, Madam President, if Senator Sweeten considers the assistance that has already been given to scores of fishermen from the Small Business Development Center in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian inspiring. How does he view the proposed capital works in Spanish Wells and Russell Island? Boy, this is good government. This is good government. I tell you, this is good government. Madam President, this administration has allocated $15 million to support social service assistance programs. $48 million has also been directly allocated to special assistance programs to put money in the hands of employees that have been affected by this pandemic. This administration has also allocated $80 million for the further expansion of solar projects on the Family Islands and for the government buildings. Madam President, does the side opposite consider this to be unimaginative as well? Madam President, in one breath they tell us that we should be bold and that this budget is not enough. And in another breath, they say that we are borrowing too much. Well, which is it? This administration is doing the best it can with the limited resources that we have, and I applaud this government for taking the bold step to protect the well-being of citizens, maintain the economic stability of our country, and plant the seeds of accelerated recovery. In closing, Madam President, this administration has been tested over and repeatedly. This government was barely able to get out of the blocks before being completely thrown off track with these devastating blows to our economy. While the reconstruction of our Northern Islands and the management of this COVID-19 pandemic have become the main priorities of this government, as these twin disasters left behind billions of dollars in economic problems, we will continue to ensure the strengthening of our public services and continue to provide support to those most in need. Madam President, the road to recovery will not be paved with gold, but together we will rise above these challenges. This budget addresses big issues and begins to tackle the challenges we face. We will create a country that works for every Bahamian. Our country will bounce back, and we will remain ever resilient in the face of crisis. Madam President, it gives me great opportunity to second this budget. I thank you, and may God bless us all, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
You were very good.
One, give me a second. Senator, it's been moved and seconded that a bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money toward defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on the revenue account for the financial year commencing the 1st of July 2020 and ending the 30th of June 2020 be read a second time when committed. As many, the chair recognizes Senator Dalvo.
Thank you so much, Madam President. And after allowing the senator before me to speak without interrupting him, I must remind him that much of what he said is a matter of opinion. Some of it is untrue, and the balance is political rhetoric. At a time when our country needs steady hands, need a focused mind, and the ability to be able to move our country from where it is to where it needs to be post-COVID-19. Madam President, on behalf of the leadership of our party, I wish to extend congratulations to the graduates of the class of 2020 across the Bahamas. These young men and women have been thrust into a world of uncertainties, a world where the old playbook has been turned upside down. But in the midst of chaos, there are multitudes of opportunities. And I say to these bright individuals, seek to find these opportunities. Have faith in your capacity to achieve, and have faith in your country. Madam President, with your leave, I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate our team in the other place for their remarkable contributions and the support that they have given to the Bahamian people to demonstrate that this budget is not a true representation of what is necessary for our country at this time. Madam President, this afternoon I rise with a heavy heart to make my contribution to one of the most critical budgets in the history of our Commonwealth. The truth of the matter is the budget lacks vision, it lacks creativity, and from the numbers, it is unsustainable. After 3 years of governance, this administration refuses to be transparent, honest with the Bahamian people, and quick to blame the PLP for their shortcomings and failure to act. Therefore, it is incumbent for us in the official opposition to expose the fallacy of what this administration is trying to do in this 2020-2021 budget. Madam President, our nation is facing threats to our way of life due to external forces beyond our control. We have been fighting for many years the threat of blacklisting, from foreign regulators to our financial services sector, that despite the challenges that we face, still remains the second pillar of our economy. Then there are the threats and the realities of hurricanes that have taken an even more aggressive tone in the recent past due to the result of climate change. We are also currently facing threats in our health and well-being because of the deadly global pandemic, COVID-19, that has brought challenges to our economy and our livelihood. The IMF, in a report published to the website on June the 5th, 2020, states the Bahamas faces an unprecedented crisis as it battles the fallout from 2 consecutive large shocks. It was just recovering from the widespread destruction caused by Hurricane Dorian in the fall of 2019, when COVID-19 pandemic led to a sudden stop in tourism, causing deep recession and creating a large external and physical financing needs for our country. The report goes on to say, looking beyond the crisis, it would be important for the authorities to resume their reforms agenda, including enhancing public finance management and state-owned enterprise governance, advancing revenue administration reforms, and the strengthening and resilience of natural disaster preparation must remain a priority. Madam President, psychologists have framed our normal physiological reaction to threats of fight or flight, meaning when we are faced with threats, the hormone adrenaline is released in the bloodstream, and we either fight our way out of the threat or we run away. Sticking our head in the sand and waiting for the threat to go away has not been cited as a normal response. But this is exactly what the government is doing with this budget. Sleeping in a time of crisis. Madam President, it appears that instead of kicking the can down the road, this minister-led administration have decided to do worse and leave the can in the middle of the road. They have taken the cowardly position of putting off tomorrow what must be done today. But I say to this F&M administration, we must face the music for what it really is, instead of creating a tune that ties in with the political dance for re-election. It is the same tune the Free National Movement sang in 2016. The same tune the senator who spoke before me is singing, leading up to the next general election. Say one thing, trying to be elected, and do the opposite if you get control of the government. You know, we must listen, and we have listened in the past 3 years and heard the same chorus over and repeatedly. The PLP didn't do this, and the PLP didn't do that. Yet, we wait to hear what you plan to do or what you intend to do. I was listening to you, but I didn't hear anything. Madam President,
Please do not interrupt the speaker.
Madam President, the reason the government blames everything on the PLP is because otherwise they would have to take responsibility for their own actions or lack thereof. So even in the midst of all our challenges as a country, instead of the government laying out a proper plan of action that will ensure that we do not end up in the clutches of the IMF in the next few years, they have taken the cowardly way out and have decided to stand to their feet, offering platitudes instead of answers to questions that need immediate answers. Echoing the praise used by the Prime Minister recently in one of his uninspiring press conferences in the heat of COVID-19 pandemic, I must ask this administration, where is your vision? Where is your creativity?
We don't know.
And where is your heart? Madam President, where is your heart? I didn't say heart, I say heart. In the annual budget 2020-2021 draft estimates of review and expenditure, the Minister of Finance outlined 6 goals. But none of these goals speak about growing the economy. Sad. or facilitating policies that would encourage the growth and expansion of local business enterprises that have been practically devastated as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the emergency orders put in place by your administration. So the big question for this administration is, what are the hard decisions the Minister of Finance said the government will have to take? Once again, I ask this administration, where is your vision? Where is your creativity in the time that is needed most? The good book tells us, yes, I've read the good book, it tells us that where there is no vision, the people will perish. Madam President, in a letter from the Minister of Finance to the International Monetary Fund dated May the 22nd, 2020, the government outlined a strategy to protect our citizens and the economy as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. Incredibly, this is what the Honorable Minister said to the IMF. We appointed an Economic Recovery Committee to advise the government on the way to jumpstart our economy following the COVID-19 crisis with a focus on job creation and stimulating small business development. We on this side, Madam President, fully endorse input from all sectors of the economy, from business leaders in shaping the way forward. This is healthy and is what every good thinking government must do. But never, I say never in the history of our Commonwealth that we have seen the full responsibility to jumpstart the economy delegated away from members of Parliament who are elected by the people. It is good to have committees, but the responsibility lies on the elected individuals in the House of Assembly. In presenting the 2020-2021 budget,
Sorry, just
Would you yield, Senator Dowell? On a point of order?
What in that statement you read from the Minister of Finance says that this Parliament will have nothing to do with assisting in stimulating jobs. It outlines the government's policies to stimulate employment and to, with the assistance and technical advice of a committee to guide us in that. Where does it say that this Parliament will play no role in that?
Madam President, we're in the middle of a debate. No, let me finish what I have to say, because you will have an opportunity to speak. We are in the middle of debate, and I am reading a quote. What the Minister of Finance said. The Minister of Finance indicated in his quote, and this is what he said to the International Monetary Fund on May the 22nd, 2020. Not what Dr. Dowell has said, what the Minister of Finance said. And maybe the Minister of Finance need to clarify what he said, or if you want to clarify it, that is fine. But I am quoting what he said. So you stand on a point of order to clarify what the minister said. That's fine with me. But I am quoting what he said. And based on what he said, I made the presumption, and I've already said it. I will read it again for you if you insist. No, but you see, Madam, could my time being cut short? No. Then I would not read it, because I have a limited amount of time to do what I need to do. Let me do what I need to do. We on this side opposite fully endorse input from all sectors of the economy. We do. I already said that. I'm repeating it for you. In presenting the 2020-2021 budget, the Minister of Finance is quoted as saying a statement issued by the Bahamas Information Services that the budget is designed to transform this crisis, this is what he said, not what I said, into an opportunity for future prosperity. As a matter of fact, it's on your thing in here. I will quote it. Yeah, that's what he said. Yes. No problem. And that was right what you said, because that's what the minister said. Now, this is what I'm going to say.
Yeah, let's hear you.
Yeah.
Let's hear you, Donald.
The Minister of Finance also called this budget unprecedented. And he is right. It is unprecedented in its lack of solutions, especially given the economic crisis that looms over our country. We must therefore ask this F&M administration, where are your bag of solutions that you talked about in 2017? And while you're at it, where's your vision? And where's your creativity? And where is your heart? In a Tribune article dated the 8th of June 2020 by Neil Hartnell, reported that in approving the $250 million loan to the Bahamas, the IMF revealed the government must run a unheard of $500 million surplus beginning the year 2024-2025 budget to hit the key debt reduction target by the end of this decade. The former central bank governor, Mr. James Smith, quickly declared that hitting the IMF target would be like Usain Bolt, like beating Usain Bolt in the 100-yard dash. So the question is, are we on a fool's errand? No matter how many times this administration promised to deliver the pie-in-the-sky debt to GDP of 50%, in the words of the American economist Alan Greenspan, the large deficits will result in rising interest rates and a growing debt to GDP. Talk is cheap. Flurries and platitudes do not make sense in this kind of reality. We are in trouble, and the Bahamian people need to know what's happening with our country. Madam President, the IMF went on to advise this minister-led administration to immediately shift to rebuilding buffering and strengths. Resilience to the COVID-19 crisis has passed. The decisive physical measures are needed to bring public debt on a clear downward path in order to achieve physical targets under the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And yes, I do agree with our leader on this side that the Fiscal Responsibility Act, as far as I am concerned, is proven to be nothing more than a political promise, a PR exercise, and lack accountability. And that's Dr. Davel's position. You could quote that when you get back up on your feet. The reality is that in order for us to reduce public debt, the government must find ways not only to reduce expenditure, but most importantly, find ways to increase revenue. And that's what this budget is lacking. Nothing about increasing revenue. If our revenue is heavily, I come into that because that's exactly what you're planning to do. That's what I believe. And that's the undertone of the budget.
That's the undertone.
If our revenue is heavily weighed on tourism arrivals, then the very tools of solving our physical challenges are out of our control. I want to say that again. If our revenue is tied into tourism arrivals post-COVID-19, then the very tools for solving our physical challenges are outside of our control. And that's why I keep asking, where is your creativity? Because it's going to take time for the tourism sector to rebound. Another revenue earner, and this is with some support to what the AG has been doing in his office. Another revenue earner for our economy is the financial services sector. This sector has been under an orchestrated attack by the OECD and members of the European Union. The issue is so egregious that it deserves special attention, and over the last 5 years, in the PLP administration, and now in this F&M administration, we have passed a wide cross-section of legislation to please the foreign regulators. And in spite of all that we have done, we cannot meet the unrealistic demands of the European Union, whose undeclared intention appears to be the elimination of the second pillar of our economy, the financial services sector. AG, I support you 100% in focusing to try to save it, because we are getting hit from every direction. And it is the second pillar of our economy. So tourism has been hit from COVID-19. The financial services sector is constantly under attack. So in the face of all the evolving pressures on our tourism, our financial services sector, and the cascading effects of COVID-19 pandemic on our economy and healthcare delivery systems, we must face the fact, and I say this, not as a political directive, as a Bahamian, we must face the fact that the old economic models will not work. And we can't wait until the COVID crisis abates to formulate the necessary plans and framework to chart new territory. We need to move in new territory. We must find innovative ways to cut our coat according to our cloth. Cut our coat according to the cloth. To do otherwise would be unwise and would hurt the country's recovery efforts post-COVID-19. Madam President, in less than 3 years, this F&M administration has borrowed more than $3 billion gross and close to $1.5 billion net. And the reality is, there's little to show for it. There may be talks that maybe it's the PLP, blame everything on the PLP. But the reality is, when we look on the ground, we have very little to show for it. Madam President, there's a saying that goes like this. If you do not want to get the same results, then you need to change your approach on what you're doing. I cry shame on this administration because when you closely examine the budget numbers, it is highly probable, and I want to say this, and I hope it's not so. When you examine the budget numbers, it's highly probable that when you come back to Parliament in the midterm budget, you're coming back for some more money because this budget is unsustainable. That's right. The Bahamian people, Honorable AG, needs to know the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth about the current financial affairs of our country. They need to know about the commitment made by the government. I want to say this again because it ain't in there. It ain't in there. We want to know the commitment made by the government on May the 22nd in a letter to the IMF regarding the government's intent to do after COVID-19 crisis abates. In that letter, I will quote, the government states that it will resume various measures planned before Hurricane Dorian, including reform of tax administration and review. Let me finish because I quote what the letter say. You ain't got to quote it for me unless you want to read it for me. Reform state-owned enterprises to make them self-sustainable. In addition, we will take steps to increase revenue collection, contain the wage bill, and when you pick up the budget, you see that new hires are taking place. We just passed out a group of police officers and defense force officers. I do not see in the budget their increments, but the IMF is telling you to control your wage bill. Reduce transfers of state-owned enterprises as a measured pace over the coming years. The Bahamian people need to know what these plans entail. We all recall, we know you have a plan because we all cannot control the horror with your turnaround position on value-added tax. We remember that horror because we're living it now. The question is, are you planning to increase taxes? And I want someone on the side opposite to stand to your feet and say no.
I can stand on my feet and say we have no plans to introduce new taxes.
Thank you so much.
Or to increase existing taxes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. We do enhance revenue collection of existing taxes. And that has been a fundamental policy of this government and a professed policy of the previous government.
Thank you so much, AJ, for your courage. I thank you for your courage in putting on the record in the Senate on June the 23rd in the year of our Lord 2022 that you do not, 24th, I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry, thank you so much. No, but that's fine. No, I want it in this record from our Honorable AG. No new taxes for the Bahamian people. The question is, are you planning to increase taxes and sell off state-owned enterprises after 2022?
No, that's here. The government has a policy to seek to, wherever possible, to make existing SOEs, state-owned enterprises, as efficient as possible. They have been for decades a drag on the public revenue.
Yes, I support that 100%. But you didn't answer the question. That's not the question I asked you. The question I asked you, are you planning to sell off state-owned enterprises and increase taxes on the back of the Bahamian people after 2022? Because I said before, I've said before that psychologists does not recommend. No. That's fine, no problem.
You see that excited clap?
You see, that's what I'm saying. I want you on.
Can we have order, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Please protect me. Please protect me. Please protect me. Because even though we are few in numbers, we are power in principle. No problem. Answer my question. If you win the next general election, if you win,
Please,
will you
senators.
increase taxes on the backs of the Bahamian people the way how you increase VAT on our backs?
They can't answer.
They can't.
They can't answer.
Because the reality is,
Can we allow the member to continue
thank you.
his contribution without interruption,
Yes.
without question and answers?
I have said it before. Instead of kicking the can down the road, you all leave it in the middle of the road. The Bahamian people deserve to know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. After all, it's the people's time.
They suffer in that.
It's the people's time,
It is.
and you are the self-proclaimed government of transparency and accountability. So I expect the truth. Madam President, both the member of St. Anne's and West End and Bimini in this budget presentation downstairs were right to criticize everyone on the side opposite. The government has squandered the goodwill of the Bahamian people and many opportunities to restore our economy. And the wiggling room that we had before these crises or these two shocks have now gone. And now the reality has set in. What they have done is used up precious time to continue your 2017 political campaign while blaming the PLP for your incompetence. Madam President, the FNM is not responsible for Hurricane Dorian or COVID-19 pandemic. I wonder. But they have failed to manage both crises efficiently. Dr. Sands laid the case out clearly downstairs about the government's mismanagement of Hurricane Dorian, and he was right. He was right to call for a coroner's inquest.
Yes, he was.
And he is also right for an independent investigation because the truth of the matter is you dropped the ball during the preparation for Hurricane Dorian. You dropped the ball during the restoration phase of Hurricane Dorian. And the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama need help and answers. My God, it baffles me, Madam President. When a new minister, a highly paid managing director, a CEO, a chairman, a deputy chairman, and they bumping into one another, just looked at the state of Abaco and Grand Bahama. These two communities are in devastation and practically abandoned. And from the looks of it and this budget that you keep holding up, ain't nothing in the place. I read the budget better than you think, my brother. I was hoping you would give me yours, but you didn't bring yours today. I listen.
I serious.
Madam President.
Protected image.
Yeah, thank you so much, cousin. Please protect me. Madam President, I listened to the members downstairs and their contribution in the other place. And the phrase that I keep hearing coming up from their camp is that we are in unprecedented times. It was repeated so often that the member for St. Anne's, the Honorable Brent Simonet, had to remind this government that the public is getting tired of it. They're tired of hearing about these extraordinary events. And I quote him, this ain't Dr. Davil. I quote your member of parliament. He's tired of this talk. He's tired of hearing of unprecedented, or whatever you call it.
Clap for that, man.
And we agree with him.
Clap for that.
We're sick and tired of it, just like the Bahamian people are sick and tired of hearing it. The phrase has been repeated so often, it's played out, man. It's played out. I think the members opposite somehow believes that it will lull the Bahamian public into a kind of deep sleep or hypnosis to distract them from the dire straits our economy is in. Madam President, so here we are today. Let me get to the budget. Like other countries around the world, facing the economic fallout from this COVID-19 pandemic, and we are trying to order our lives. That's what we are trying on this side, the members of the opposition, and the lives of the citizens through the allocation of resources. That's it. Let me just finish the statement right here. Through the allocation of resources. No, we stop right there. Thank you so much. I'll mark where I stop. No, I ain't finished. No, we break it. Yes, he says he's breaking, so I'll come out.
So this is a convenient time.
Yes, a convenient time, because I'm moving into a new topic. Thank you, sir.
Madam President, I beg leave to move that the Senate on its rising be suspended until 2 p.m. this afternoon. If I may, 2 p.m., 1 hour for lunch. If I may obtain a second.
Madam President, I rise to second. It's a witchcraft.
It's been moved and seconded that the Senate on its rising be suspended until 2 p.m. As many as are in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed nay. The ayes have it. The Senate will be suspended until 2 p.m.